Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Rachel Anderson, and I'm the Marketing Content Manager here at Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors. And today, if you may not know, is actually World Mental Health Day. That's October 10th, 2022. And I'm really excited to be here with James Bosch to talk more about Mental Health Day. You know, the day is to raise awareness about mental health, mobilize efforts to support mental health initiatives. And yeah, we have James here. So just want to say a quick hello to James.
Hi, how you doing, Rachel?
Good. And I know many people in our community already know who you are, but if you don't know who James is, he is a licensed therapist in California, specializing in trauma recovery. He has over 20 years of experience working in the burn community, EMDR, and a hybrid of others to help survivors of all types of trauma move out of fear and into a life of freedom and expansiveness. And you yourself are a burn survivor, so even more of a connection to the burn community.
Definitely. It gives me cred, gets me door.
Awesome. Well, I so appreciate you joining me today. So we might as well just dive on in. Sure. So this year's slogan for World Mental Health Day is "Make mental health and well-being for all a global priority." So, we hear the term mental health, but that can kind of mean a few different things to different people. So can you kind of just give us a quick overview of what we think or what we classify mental health as?
Yeah, I mean, it's a large question, but I also, before I do that, I want to comment that I just love the name of Mental Health Day this year, because I think that it's really helpful for our mental health and our well-being as a species that we see ourselves as a global community. I think all the lines and divisions are causing a lot of pain in our world today. So, we're all on this vibrant spinning rock, doing it together. So I really like that that idea of a global awareness for mental health, and that we are a global community. Mental health means many things, but primarily it's just our emotional and our mental well-being. How our thoughts, our spirituality, our behaviors, our actions, our everything are all working together to promote our general well-being. I think the other thing I like about Mental Health Awareness Day is that there is a lot of stigma in many communities in our country and the world to talk about our mental health. It's somehow seen as a moral failure if you are not coping in a certain way, or expressing feelings of mental distress can be seen or labeled as a weakness. Or so and there's many families and cultures that have like a code of silence around these topics, and you're not allowed to talk about it or expose it because it will reflect on us as a family or a community. And so I think bringing awareness that, mental health is just as important as our physical health, our financial health, our, all kinds of the things that we value, and how we kind of perceive ourselves as well. And
yeah,
they're all connected.
Yeah. When you were talking about that, I can't remember what brand it is for a commercial, but I've seen it a lot lately, where it's a guy in the gym, he's like weightlifting, and his friend comes up to him because he's holding on all the weight to himself. And he's like, I can't talk about my mental health because it's not a thing we do. Right. And you hit on that so much, how, I mean, we can even see a change, I would say, even in the last 10 years, just talking about mental health in general has increased, which is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think even in the burn community and in the burn profession, I mean, you'd be surprised how many burn centers still don't have a designated mental health professional, psychologist, therapist, to the burn center. And it's like seen as like something that if it's needed, and it's needed for everyone, because oftentimes, I know that many of the burn survivors that may be listening to this is, you're silently suffering and you're waiting for someone to ask you that question, that opening to talk about the mental anguish that's going along with the devastation that's happened to your life through the burn. And I think it's super important for me as someone who was burned as an infant, in a time when mental health was definitely not part of the paradigm of discussion in the process. And even having a young, well-intentioned mother, who asked, was actually told when we talked about this, if he doesn't talk about anything, or if he doesn't mention it, or if he doesn't talk about problems, don't bring it up. And so here I am waiting for someone to show me how to talk about it. Right. And it's just not happening. Yeah. So I think it's super important.
Yeah, I almost think it's like you said, like those silent sufferers. If you're not talking about it at all, there's a high chance that they want to express it, but maybe they're just not sure how, or not sure who to turn to. Which I see a lot.
And, just giving people the destigmatizing it, and also, giving people languages and ways to ask for help, because we're not often taught how to do that either.
Definitely. So can your mental health change over time? I mean, not just thinking about survivors in general, but, there's much more trauma even than just a burn injury that people can suffer throughout their lives. So can it change over time?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, think about times of your own life where you think everything was maybe really going good, and times when it hasn't been going good. And mentally. I mean, we have developmental stages in our life, right, as humans, and each developmental phase in our life has its own individual challenges and tasks that we need to accomplish. And when we are traumatized, or we're having some other kind of mental health disorder, it makes doing those normal tasks difficult. And then it causes problems later on, because developmentally we're not prepared for certain challenges or just phases of life. Even myself, I was talking with a friend just the other day, like some of my things I'm worried about now are changing, because I'm now like in mid-50s, and there's like new fears about what's next, and change as we develop.
Yeah, definitely. And so I actually saw a statistic that said that 1 in 5 Americans will experience a mental health illness in a given year. Do you actually think that is higher, given that, we're not talking about it as often? Do you think that number is much higher?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see what that study was, but it's because how did they define mental illness? And because there's such a range, I mean, personally, and this is my personal opinion, with all the crazy stuff going on in our country and in the world right now, if you aren't a little disturbed and a little anxious, then I mean, like, there's just a lot, in having a good mental health, practice, and working on your mental health and talking about it, those anxieties and those fears and the insanity are more manageable. Don't overwhelm us. But when someone has a true mental health illness or disorder, the reality is it does overwhelm you, and it makes simple life tasks and functioning very difficult and very sad and very hard. So I think I mean, I think that I can't comment on the number. I think it is probably higher than that, and I think you'd have to define what that meant, what the mental, I mean, disorder, there's depressive disorders, there's trauma-related disorders, there's biological genetic disorders, and different level ways that make it difficult for us to mentally and emotionally cope with the world.
Yeah, definitely over the past 2 years, we have had a lot of change in our world, and a lot of unexpected change. So I definitely feel you there. I mean, we even saw so many people felt isolation for the first time, and I'm sure that can even trigger, your mental health and your well-being. We were all stuck inside alone for so long. And even getting back out there now, not just as a survivor, but just as a normal person.
Anxiety were off the charts for a lot of people during the last few years. And then also for some people, it was quite who have like a tendency to isolate already, it was wonderful.
Yep.
Because it like, oh, I don't have to deal with it. So now that when things are opening again, for those people, it's hard rather than so that
Well,
brings a different level of everyone's coping differently with things.
for sure, definitely. Well, and that kind of leads me into one of my other questions. Yes, burn survivors can experience mental health issues, but what about also loved ones? I know that they're not the survivor and they often tend to push their own needs and feelings aside, but can they be experiencing some of, these issues as well?
Definitely. Well, you say they're not the survivor. Well, my soapbox is that the whole family is a survivor. As we talk about a lot in our work with the Phoenix Society and burn community, is the family is also experiencing the trauma, and they're experiencing the trauma of the burn on different levels and at different times as the person who was injured. So yeah, they sometimes are forgotten, and you're correct, because many loved ones feel like my needs and my fears and my mental illness is, I don't have a right to talk about that, or how can I talk about that when look how bad they have it. So making it acceptable for family members. I mean, we see the statistics of how many couples don't survive a burn injury, right? And often the other partner who wasn't actually burned hasn't been given a chance, or hasn't dealt with their own adjusting to the trauma themselves, and then people just don't come back together. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. Well, and maybe you can relate to this too, but I was a childhood burn survivor, so I also saw, obviously, so I was burned when I was 3. Didn't really understand what was happening, but as I grew up and going into middle school and high school and all of my different life phases, you kind of have new challenges that arrive that you weren't expecting or weren't really thinking about until they're there.
They are there, they're waiting, right? And as I can relate with that too, as a child survivor. And adolescence was hell, and I didn't have the vocabulary or the tools to deal with kind of the social shaming that I experienced. And one of my mentors, who's been a mentor to the whole burn community, Megan Bronson, she talks about definitely how social shaming is one of the pieces of trauma for survivors, not just children, but also adults, as they are trying to accept this new visual appearance in a society that reflects back to them, either verbally or non-verbally, that they're not okay. So Megan and I did a talk in World Burn 2020 on trauma, and we've done many talks together. Megan has been such an asset to the community and a great teacher for me, and she talks about how trauma is kind of like a spectrum. Survivors have not every survivor has PTSD. Not everyone has PTSD, but many survivors develop it's not official term yet. They're trying to get it to be in the DSM-5 or next DSMs, but it's complex trauma, because you have the trauma of the injury, you have the trauma of the burn care, which is painful and long, you have the trauma of the social adjustment, and then you have all the other maybe little in your life before that injury, right? So it's all stacked up, and so that's why it's sometimes it can be a little challenging to work through that. Then you need help. You need to get help, and that's why the awareness is important about it's okay.
Yeah, no, that's funny, because I don't love going to the doctors, by no surprise, because I didn't have good experiences in the hospital growing up. So it's funny that you brought that up, because it's like my family's all the time like, just go to the doctor, and I'm like, no, I don't want to, but I'm working on it. I'm trying to get better at it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when we were talking about mental health, sometimes people don't have a great first experience with a mental health professional
Mm-hmm.
or with the system. Because like if you don't have privilege and resources, the public health system can be hard to navigate
Yeah.
because mental health isn't funded like the rest of the services, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes harder. And so I think it's important to help people realize that, you know, the first experience isn't going to be all your experiences and to keep trying. It's almost like dating. You're not always going to have great dates and then you might
Yep.
be great, you know, so.
Yep. And I mean, there are so many different methods of therapy now. You can even text a therapist versus going in person and sitting down with someone. Maybe you'd rather just be on the phone or in your own home. You know, I love that you can be in pajamas on the couch without having to leave your house.
Yeah, especially, you know, COVID put most services online, and a lot of therapists, including myself, are still fully doing video practice. So
Definitely. So you did bring up PTSD a little bit. What are some other, you know, what are some other factors, or I don't know exactly the words I'm looking for here, but that burn survivors may be experiencing too?
well, I think in the area of PTSD, you know, when we're initially traumatized, we're going to have some PTSD symptoms, but they don't always sustain. Sometimes they totally resolve on their own. When they don't, that's when you probably need to get some help because the symptoms can be quite debilitating. You know, there's hypervigilance, always waiting for something terrible to happen, which can be paralyzing. Intrusive thoughts, worrying thoughts all the time, intrusive memories of the incident or flashbacks as if you're actually again, nightmares, mood disorders, you know, anxiety, depression, and then avoidance of things in life that either remind you of the trauma or so some of these things can really get in the way from you getting back out into your life. And so, so definitely working with therapists, peer support is powerful. You know, I'm involved with many of the groups, as you know, and oftentimes when a survivor comes into the group and just hears another survivor talking about their PTSD symptoms and how they've navigated it, like that right there just gives like hope and relief that they can get through it. So I think a combination of professional help, if you're really suffering, and peer support is the magic combo, because in any other spiritual or self-help practices that, you know, make sense to you. But it's kind of like you got to build a whole, you know, like comprehensive approach to dealing with PTSD. A lot of times we go to really behaviors that we think are helping the symptoms, like substances and other things like that, and that just hindering and impeding the healing from them.
Yep, definitely. Definitely. I mean, and you did bring up some of our, you know, we do have an online peer support chat. We have virtual support group that's on the second and fourth Mondays of every month. We'll include links to all of those below. But, you know, we also have a community calendar. You know, some folks would rather connect with someone in person, or, you know, even like we were talking about finding maybe the right therapist for you. Maybe you have to try 5 different support groups and find the group that's for you.
I always suggest that, keep, you know, it's the same thing like when someone gets sober and they start going to like a 12-step meetings. Well, not every meeting has the same vibe. And so just keeps going until you find one that fits for you. You know, it's the same burn support group meetings too sometimes.
Yeah, I love at World Burn Congress too, when we have those like breakout groups with, you know, childhood burn survivors. I obviously identify with that group, and, you know, just being with folks that you can really relate to can go a long way. So
I think a lot of the mental anguish for people is that they have a hard time finding people that they could talk to that don't just offer them platitudes or want to fix things. And what we need when we're healing is we need to be understood and seen and heard, and not given like good thing you're alive. These little, at least you made it, like we need to
Mhm.
like be validated first before we can move to those more positive.
Mhm. Yeah. So, and we kind of started talking about this a little bit about maybe finding a therapist or joining a support group, but what other, tips would you suggest someone trying?
Well, with any mental health issue, right? So, especially with burn trauma, I think is finding things that you can reconnect with that bring you some kind of like satisfaction or joy, is
Mhm.
important, because the focus is so on just the treatment, and getting, in the recovery. And I think we need to see that we can either rejoin with our lives, that things we liked about our lives, or that it's a chance to create new life,
Mhm.
So I think it's important to connect with those things. I think it's important to find peer groups where we feel connected and supported. I think it's important that we get outside and moving in some capacity. And, I think nature for me is one of the healers. So I think a lot of people get stuck in their rooms, in their houses, and
Mhm.
year of the sun. Well, there's ways to be in the sun safely. It's like to get out and reconnect with the world is super important. Arts, hobbies,
Yeah.
pet, anything that feels like, I think it's also like when we start getting involved with community, we start helping others too. And when we're not solely focused on ourselves and we're focused on helping others, that's very healing too.
Hmm. Yeah. And for me personally, I thrive off of a routine. So even if, waking up, I like working out in the morning, but even if I don't have a ton of time, just going on a 10-minute walk around my block just gets me in the right mindset for the day and
Yeah, those
clears my head.
are so important. Whether you do prayer or meditation, whether you do some kind of reading first thing, like I find that we often, when we've experienced trauma, a lot of times sleep is challenging for us. And a lot of times we wake up in the morning anxious or with anxious thoughts
Hmm.
left over from the night or of the day, right? And so I think if you can develop some kind of practice that shifts your thinking or your focus on the world first thing in the morning, it's very powerful.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it that way, but that's such a good point. Just having something in that morning to shift you. It's a really
Different,
great point.
because oftentimes I don't, what my brain's telling me is not helpful.
Hmm.
You got to hear something else.
Definitely. And I know recently you also just posted a blog on our resource center all about self-sabotage. Now, does that fall under mental health or how does that relate?
Most definitely. Well, it's funny because when Amber asked me to write that, I thought, oh, this is a really great topic, because a lot of times myself, and I hear this a lot from people, is there's things causing us pain in our lives. And there's things we're saying that are causing us pain.
Mm-hmm.
And there's things that we're always saying we wish we had or wish we could do. And yet when people offer solutions, we often put up all these roadblocks of getting to these places, right? And so I think it's an important part of mental health, because there are legitimate reasons why we stay stuck. And if we can see those reasons why we're staying stuck and kind of take away the shame from the behavior and see why we're doing it, then we can see ways out of it. A lot of times change is just terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we grew up in environments where we weren't taught how to critically think and how to have like emotionally intelligent like decisions and stuff. We have to learn those things because they weren't, modeled for us. A lot of times we have just really strong self-critical voices that aren't our voices. We weren't born with them. They come from outside society or our family culture or our general culture or whatever, but they get internalized and they can hold us back. And And also there's this thing I talk about in the blog about secondary gains. And these are really kind of hard to describe because they're unconscious many times, but it's like I get something from being stuck. So like say I'm afraid of dating, but I say all the time I'm lonely, right?
Yeah.
But I'm really internally afraid of it, right? So I do behaviors and I do things to keep me from having successful dates or dating at all, because the secondary gain is I stay safe.
Yep.
Right. And so looking at these patterns of why we self-sabotage is great, because then when we see it, then we can look for solutions on how to get out of it and move forward. So many times I hear people talk about the same problems like over and over again for months and months and months, and they aren't open to solution. And I've been here before too. We all have. And so helping figure out, there's a reason why I'm not taking solution. There's a reason why I'm not. And maybe it's legitimate, like serious mental health issue that needs to be addressed, why we aren't.
Yeah. And I think it's also really important to note that, not every day is going to be a good day. You may take 10 steps forward and then you may take a few steps back, but you can keep moving forward.
I would take out and say from May and say, usually.
Yeah.
That's how change, right? Like we a big leap, we push through something and then we make a little slip back.
Yeah.
But there's a change cycle in that's used a lot in addiction recovery. And, it's like pre-contemplation, where you don't really know the problem, contemplation, where you know there's a problem, but you're not ready to make a change. And then there's action, where you're, okay, now I'm ready to do some things to make a change. And then there's maintenance of the change. So that's like cycle. But there's an important piece that's often not talked about in that cycle, and it's not linear, it's a circle because you go around, is that there's relapse. So often slip back. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because when we slip back, we get lessons. We can just jump right back into action with the new learning we have. So taking the shame out of that cycle, I like how you said that, we go forward and then we go back. We go forward and we go. That's, if we can have some real, I think when we're dealing with hard life, mental health and life challenges, if we can apply some more like compassion and self love and patience to ourselves, we can see that some of those relapses and some of those slips back and some of those frustrations are actually helpful to the path.
Yeah. And that maintenance piece you talked about too is really, really important. Just because, you're feeling good doesn't mean maybe you should stop attending that virtual support group. Just keep going, and you can help others too. That's, why peer support is so powerful, is you can gain from others and then you can give back to others as well.
New habits take a while. They take reinforcement. They take routine. They take diligence. They take action. So.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely make sure that we link that self-sabotage article and then that World Burn Congress event you did with Megan on PTSD below. So anyone who wants to read those or watch those, I highly encourage you to do so. I don't want to take up too much of your time today. I really appreciate you joining. Do you have anything else you'd like to share before we close it out?
There is a new national 911 88, and it's an easy number to have in your phone or remember, and it's a national crisis line. And I think there's no shame in calling and asking for help, especially in those moments of darkness. It's been statistically shown that when somebody's suicidal, if they actually talk to a human, any human, they will probably not do it that day. And there's a chance for some hope and for some help. So I just wanted to put that out there. I also wanted to say that, we're all not well on the same day, and we're not all sick on the same day. So some days you're feeling good, like you say, and some days you're going to feel bad. And if we can remember that, And I often tell people that too, and about our, joining a support group of any kind of support community. You may need help one day, and then one day you might feel great, and you might be just the right person that someone else needs to hear from. So it's like, that whole circle. So.
Yeah, definitely. And and of course, you can always reach out to Phoenix Society. I will make sure our email and phone number are listed below. And I mean, along with we just have a new online survivor and loved one Facebook group where you can post and connect with others, but there are a ton of other groups as well. Just highly encourage, getting connected to someone and having that one person you can call whenever you need can always be so helpful. And maybe it's just, hey, I just need you on the line. Tell me about your day, distract my mind. And yeah.
We all need to find, I will say too, is like, if you're feeling lonely and isolated, just find one or two people that you can have on your speed dial or text, and just start there.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you need help finding a therapist or figuring out strategies, definitely reach out to the Phoenix Society. We can help you.
Definitely. Yes. We have a whole community of peer supporters. So we'd love to get you connected if you want to. So thank you so much, James. I so appreciate you joining me for World Mental Health Day. I appreciate it so much. Thanks.
All right. Have a good day.
Bye.